Tamriel, Dawn's beauty in the language of the Altmer, or Tazukan in the Dragon's Tongue, is the continent upon which all the Elder Scrolls games take place. Home to many diverse races and even more conflicts, Tamriel has been host to many adventures. You've experienced Tamriel in your own way, but want to learn more about its story. Well, to get to the heart of the story, you have to go back to the beginning. Every man, woman, and child inside the walls is trained from birth to defend it. The Orc Strongholds have existed for as long as the Orc race has, and each one represents its denizens perfectly. The Orcs are a widespread race of outcasts who cling to their independence like a Nord clings to his mead. Most citizens of Tamriel regard Orc society as rough and cruel, but there is much to admire in their fierce tribal loyalties and generous equality of rank and respect. You won't find an Orc trying to cheat you in a trade, and you won't find them picking a fight with someone who can't handle it. In general, the Orcs are, above all, honor-bound. The other mortal races might see them as cruel savages, but they never sought the enslavement of any people or forced any religion on those who would have none. If history is to have a voice, let it be known that the Orcs have sought nothing more but a good fight. To stand face to face with an Orc on the battlefield is to know fear. The battle-hardened Nords of Skyrim might look formidable, but no one wields intimidation like an Orc. Their muscular frames and unshakable courage make them hardened enough, but to go anywhere near an Orc berserker who has gone into a rage is just plain suicide. Above all, an Orc relies on strength and raw stamina. Battle axes, claymores, warhammers, they are all wielded with ease by even the meekest Orc. When meeting an Orc warband on an open field, first, attempt to run. If you can't do that, at least make peace with your maker. On the battlefield, an Orc warrior has been readily compared to a frenzied ox. Anything that comes too close leaves looking like it's been chopped under a butcher's cleaver. Even if you were to land a blow on an Orc, you've probably only managed to piss him off. Orcish steel is made out of one of the densest metals mined on Nirn, and Orcish blacksmiths are renowned for their metalwork, but not renowned like the elves are renowned. Elven armor has to look pretty and decorated, while Orcish armor is crude and, frankly, downright ugly. Like the race they are modeled after, Orcish armor might be lackluster on the outside, but it is built to take an incredible amount of punishment. The Nords brag and flaunt their steel, hell, they even sing songs about them. But on the battlefield, the Orcs cut through their armor like butter. When it comes to craftsmanship that simply gets the job done, no one bests an Orc. The translation of awesomer is pariah folk. You see, the Orcs are considered to be the social outcasts of Tamriel. Due to this, many Tamrielic cultures have scorned the Orcs and treated them as no more than callous brutes. Their only redeeming quality in the eyes of the public over the last few eras has been their combat skills when serving in the Imperial Legion. That's right, not all Orcs stay in their strongholds. As a matter of fact, like the other races, many Orcs leave their homes at a young age in search of adventure. Those Orcs who leave their strongholds are liable to become sellswords or soldiers under the Legion. Once an Orc leaves his stronghold, he is forever labeled a city Orc by his brothers. With the exception of those individuals fighting under the Imperial Empire, the Orcs follow no laws save their own, an unwritten set of rules called the Code of Malacath. Most of it's pretty simple. Don't steal, don't kill, don't attack people for no reason, although there seems to be a long list of exceptions to this rule. Orcs don't have jails for their criminals. Such a practice is counterproductive in a society where everyone must pull their own weight. The Orcs will tell you that putting a man behind bars only to clothe and feed him seems stupid. To break the code in a stronghold means you either pay enough in goods for your crimes, or you bleed enough that the victim is satisfied. and orcs, I don't need to tell you, crave a lot of blood. The code also sets up who runs the stronghold. The toughest male is made chief through proven combat, and he makes decisions and decides when the code of Malacath has been satisfied. All the women are either the chief's wives or his daughters, with the exception of the wise woman, who handles all the spiritual matters, much like a shaman would. In the stronghold, only the chief is allowed to have children. This ensures strength for the future generations. An orc grows up being told to fight for everything. You come into this world kicking and screaming, it is only fitting you leave in a similar fashion. In the strongholds, you won't find any old orc males. For an orc to live until he has gray in his hair is considered shameful. Their society has no place for people who have outlived their usefulness. To cling to a life that no longer serves a purpose is an affront to Malacath. Orcs who miraculously live to a ripe old age leave the stronghold to seek an honorable death in the wilds. Chieftains will never live to see this day, seeing as they rule a stronghold until their sons are strong enough to challenge them in one-on-one combat. This society, in where only the strong are permitted to flourish and the weak perish, has bred the orcs into some of the most merciless killers Tamriel has ever seen, and they don't much care what you think about that. The story of how the orcs arrived on Tamriel is one shrouded by myth and legend, but each time the story is retold, no matter in which language, it starts with one name: Trinimac. In a time before recorded history, when the elves resided in the Somerset Isles, there came an exodus. The Chimer, whose descendants would one day be known as the Dark Elves, were no longer content worshipping the Aedra in the Somerset Isles. What they sought was revolution, an exodus to the east, to Morrowind. The Aedra of the early Aldmer did not wish to see their elven brethren depart from them. As one of those early ancestors, Trinimac and his followers sought to stop the great exodus. However, the Daedric prince of plots and deceiver of nations outwitted Trinimac and devoured him. Assuming Trinimac's form, Boethia sowed seeds of chaos amongst the elves. The Daedric prince succeeded in her plans, and the final exodus of the Chimer was underway, but her work with the elves of Somerset was only just beginning. Whether Boethia sought to punish Trinimac, the elves who followed him, or if it's just in a Daedra's nature, Boethia transformed the remains of Trinimac into a new Daedric prince. The Daedric prince of the spurned and ostracized, of the sworn oath and bloody curse. Trinimac was no more. Henceforth he would be called Malacath, and his followers would be cursed to walk known as outcasts, forever transformed. This was the birth of a new race on Tamriel, the birth of the Orcs. The early Orcish people never stopped following Trinimac, even if he was something different now. Malacath still held the Orcs to a code of honor and a tribal, independent lifestyle. No matter which land they settled though, the Orcs would always be considered trespassers by the other mortal races. Even in the face of this adversity, the Orcs began to heavily settle in modern-day Skyrim and High Rock, despite heated protests from the locals, which often resulted in a bloodbath. Although their race was widespread at the dawn of the First Era, the Orcs as a people never really knew what it was to have a home. Without anything permanent or lasting, it seemed history would scarcely remember the Orcs and their culture. All the Orcs were really lacking was a visionary, a leader to grease the wheels of progress. To Rug Grow I Groan was the legendary chieftain who first envisioned a lasting home for the Orcs. Up until this point, the idea of an Orc city seemed impossible for a people who so feverishly clung to their independence. At first, it was merely a small collection of huts, but as word spread to the other Orcs of Tamriel about this rising civilization in the mountains of High Rock, it soon grew into an industrious stronghold. The Bretons thought Orsinium to be little more than a desolate mountain region where the Orcs secretly coveted the lands ruled by their noble families. According to the Orcs, this was simply not the case. Bretons are prone to superstition and exaggeration, the great stronghold started to garner enough influence to make the Orcs major players on Tamriel. Sadly for Orsinium, when you're a player in High Rock, the other players plot to take you back out again. As we learned previously, the bickering nobility of High Rock never rests, and the royal families weren't about to let the simple-minded Orcs stake a claim without a fight. In the later years of the First Era, King Jolly of Daggerfall sent a letter to the renowned Altmer Battlemaster, Gaiden Shinji. Shinji led a famed group of knights from the province of Hammerfell. Their renown was so widespread they were known throughout Tamriel. That day, an alliance was formed, and the Red Guards joined the Bretons in a declaration of war against the Orcs. History remembers what followed as the Siege of Orsinium. With the finest swords Hammerfell had to offer, one would think Orsinium was liable to fall in a day. After all, what was an Orcish brute versus the raw cunning of a Breton battle mage? 30 long years passed, and the Orcs of Orsinium would finally succumb to their overwhelming opposition, but not before slaying countless humans honorably on the field of battle, including the great Gaiden Shinji himself. The 30-year siege of Orsinium would go down in history as the longest siege in Tamriel's history, and it made the Orcs the most renowned warriors in the realm. With the fall of Orsinium, the Orcs were once again forced to wander, and without a land to call their home, the other races of Tamriel held them with little regard. That was, until they needed them to pull their hides out of the fire. When an army of undead poured out of the realm of Coldharbour to threaten Tamriel in the Second Era, the Orc clans of High Rock were called upon to deliver the land from its destruction. The fight to save Tamriel would not be won alone, however, and the Orcs would be forced to ally with those who sacked Orsinium centuries ago. Together with the Red Guards and Bretons, they formed what came to be called the Daggerfall Covenant. The Orcs' contribution to the Covenant cannot be overstated. Not only did the Orcs offer the Covenant some of the most fearsome warriors their front lines had ever seen, but their talented blacksmiths kept the Covenant equipped with the finest weapons and armor in all of Tamriel. Once the threat had subsided, however, the Covenant was thrown aside, and the Orcs were thrown aside along with it. The coming of Tiber Septim's empire at the dawn of the Third Era had little to no effect on the Orcs, considering they themselves weren't a sovereign nation. At least, not yet. As is the common trend with the Orcs, the only thing they lacked was a proper leader, a visionary who would steer them to a brighter future, a future where they would no longer have to wander Tamriel. His name was Grotwog Gro-Nagrum, the Orc chieftain who envisioned the rebirth of a new Orsinium. As it turned out, this new Orsinium's future would not be secured by any act of war, but by more diplomatic means. Grotwog Gro-Nagrum proved to be a superb politician and diplomat, a very useful skill set to have considering he was trying to secure land in a province that was home to the Bretons. Not only did this Orc chieftain successfully negotiate with the nobles of High Rock, but he gained an audience with the Emperor himself. Through trade and commerce with the Imperial Empire, Tamriel would finally recognize Orsinium as a serious political power, and the Orcs garnered a newfound respect and cooperation, the likes of which they had never known. And the Bretons once again took notice. History was about to repeat itself. Feeling threatened by the Orcs of Orsinium, the Bretons once again seek its destruction. But they cannot take on the Orcs without the help of their neighbors in Hammerfell. The Red Guards had assisted in the sacking of Orsinium once before, and they would do so again. But that is a story for another day.